When I was a kid, I was always a little bit weird about food. I mean, all kids are particular, but I took it to a whole nother level. I had to have the exact same amount of food on both sides of my mouth when I chewed, and if any of the food mixed on my plate, I just wouldn't eat it. In fact, there were a lot of foods that I just wouldn't eat. Some foods I would scream and cry if they were even introduced to me. But this isn't exactly unusual for a kid. If you've ever had toddlers, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And so, it was chalked up to picky eating and a mild case of childhood theatrics. But as I got older, my issues with food never really went away. I became even more selective with my diet, and as a result, I was eating less. But it wasn't a big deal. I was just a picky eater. And then I got older, and I ate less. First went breakfast. Breakfast just makes me nauseous, and besides, it won't kill me to miss one meal, right? And then went dinner. I just had a really big lunch earlier, and I'm just not that hungry. And then went lunch. I had a granola bar earlier, so I'm all set. But seriously, it wasn't a big deal. I was just a picky eater. As I entered middle school, I started to get a lot of comments about my body. Things like, wow, you're so skinny, you need to eat a hamburger, you need to get some meat on those bones. Comments like these never particularly fazed me. But one did. I was in sixth grade at a public pool wearing a bikini, and a girl came up to me and she said, wow, you're so skinny, you must be anorexic. Now, this comment hurt. It was painful to hear, but I didn't feel insulted. I felt called out. It was the sudden realization of something I had always known to be true. At this point in my life, I didn't even know what the word anorexia meant, but I could feel what it meant. I could feel that something was wrong with me, and for the first time, someone finally pointed it out directly. But no, 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 no. No, I'm just a picky eater, right? After that, eating became a chore. I could no longer feel the basic enjoyment of a warm meal after a long day, or the feeling of a full stomach, or even the taste of my favorite foods. But there were some foods that I was still totally cool with, like white bread and water, so I must have just been a really picky eater. Slowly, people's reactions went from light-hearted jokes about my skinny stature to sad faces and shaking heads. I hadn't realized just how much my body had changed in those years. I looked at old pictures of myself and I saw bright skin, full cheeks, and thick hair. I looked at myself now and I saw pale skin, sunken cheeks, and thin, stringy hair. That girl at the pool was right. I wasn't just a picky eater. I was anorexic. And in that moment of acceptance, my journey to recovery began. After coming to terms with my disorder in this big, powerful, emotional moment, I did absolutely nothing. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't change my eating habits. I didn't even want to think about it. I knew I needed help. Every time I sat down at the dinner table or met up with my friends, I almost told them. But I never did. Because though I so desperately wanted help, sometimes it's easier to sink than it is to swim. It would be months before my mom would find out. She would find out in the form of self-harm scars that would force a very tearful conversation about my mental health. I told her everything, and it was the hardest confession I have ever made. Saying it out loud made it a real problem, and I couldn't just pretend it wasn't there anymore. The weakness and sickliness of my body was just too much to hide now. My skin stretched across my ribs like paper, and you could see every crevice of my joints. My body was dying, but people still needed me. My friends, my family, they depended on me. so facing my disorder was the only option I had. I have suffered from anorexia for most of my life. I've been in recovery for about 5 years now, and I have gained so much insight from my experiences as an anorexic. It has taken me many, many years to feel comfortable and confident enough with my disorder to be able to stand here today and share my story with all of you. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First of all, what is anorexia? Well, the NIMH defines anorexia as a restrictive eating disorder, characterized by a difficulty or inability to eat a sustainable amount of food. Anorexia nervosa is the single deadliest psychiatric disorder. 97% of patients who suffer from an eating disorder also suffer from functional impairment similar to that of autism and schizophrenia. These patients also show a 4-fold increase in substance abuse and a 57-fold increase in suicidality compared to the general population. 57. Let that sink in. In most cases, eating disorders are chronic and relapsing. Though I've been in recovery for years, I still have severe relapses. It will always be a part of who I am. I will always have anorexia. And that's okay. Because recovery for me doesn't mean making it disappear. It means learning to live with it. I've worked very hard to get a firm hold on my eating disorder, but it's still dangerous. Despite these troubling statistics, eating disorders are largely shoved under the rug by both professionals and society. The FDA has approved no pharmacological or psychological treatments for anorexia nervosa, and treatments for bulimia and binge eating disorder are incredibly limited. Well, unfortunately, research requires funding, which is something that eating disorder research just doesn't have. According to an article by the World Psychiatry Journal, in 2015, $86.97 per affected individual was spent on research for schizophrenia. In comparison, eating disorder research receives less than a dime per affected individual in funding for research. Less than 10 cents. That is absolutely astonishing considering the severity of eating disorders and how common they are. Because of this lack of research, not only is our medical treatment apathetic, but our social treatment is as well. Eating disorders have always been shrouded in a fog of stigma and misinformation. Let me ask you something. What was the first thing you noticed about me when I walked onto the stage? Was it that I'm a very tiny person? Was it the color of my skin? My hair? We tend to create assumptions about people based on their appearance. We create stereotypes based on the way they look, the way they dress. These stereotypes have a way bigger impact on people than we realize, especially people who suffer from eating disorders. The National Eating Disorder Collaboration has developed a list of common stereotypes regarding eating disorders. While I list them off, think about how many of them you believe or have been told. Eating disorders are a phase. Eating disorders can be easily resolved with a diet. You have to look a certain way to have a valid eating disorder. Eating disorders are a lifestyle choice. And my personal favorite, eating disorders are fake and used to get attention. The sad truth is, most people don't understand eating disorders, and without the proper facts, we tend to fill in the gaps with our own assumptions. Even I've been told that it isn't real, that it isn't valid, and even that it's a choice that I make. I've been told eating disorders are purely about vanity, that it's a silly, ridiculous phobia of food. Eating disorders are often incorrectly defined as a fear of food. It's not a phobia. It's not like being afraid of the dark shadow in your room at night. It's like the shadow lives inside you and controls you. Something a lot of people misunderstand about eating disorders is that they aren't just about food. It's usually a very dangerous and unhealthy way of coping with trauma or any other negative emotions. For years, I have been scrutinized for something that I can't control simply because people won't take the time to understand. Ignorant comments don't hurt me much anymore, but they used to. Even small, casual comments about my body or jokes about how I wouldn't eat were enough to make me sink deeper. People have told me things like, I'm disgusting for perpetuating toxic beauty standards. They've told me, it's not that hard, just eat. Well, if just eating was the solution, it wouldn't be a disorder. So, what can you do to help? How can you help your loved ones, your society, your community flourish? Well, the first thing you need to understand is that if you don't have an eating disorder, you will never fully understand what it's like to have one. And that's okay. You don't have to fully understand someone's experiences for them to be real and valid and important. It's an impossible thing to understand or to explain, and even harder to understand if you haven't been through it yourself. The only way I have found to explain my personal experience with anorexia is through the carrot theory. There's this theory that you have the jaw strength to bite off your finger like a carrot, but your brain has reflexes that won't let you do this. This theory has since been debunked, but it serves as a good analogy. Sometimes the muscles in my jaw will stop me from chewing, or the muscles in my throat will stop me from swallowing. It has become not only an emotional response to food, but a physical one as well. Patience is crucial when supporting a loved one through an eating disorder. Change takes time, especially when you're changing your entire relationship with food. While this explanation is okay and can help you visualize part of my experience, it doesn't come close to describing my everyday life and the everyday lives of other eating disorder survivors. But it's okay to not fully grasp the experience, and you can still be incredibly supportive. The number one thing that you can do to support your loved ones and your community is to educate yourself about eating disorders and speak out. Speak loudly and openly and unapologetically about eating disorders. Erase the stigma and taboo that holds us back and create a safer world for people like me. That's why I'm here. I want to make a difference. I want to fight for more research. I want to give a voice to those who cannot speak for themselves and power to every other eating disorder survivor whose life and well-being has been shoved under the rug. And you can too. So let's speak openly and loudly and unapologetically about eating disorders and help our world flourish. Thank you.